Story that haunts Trump, but he is clearly willing to risk a lot, including the midterms, to deal with. That is the fact that he and his fans were part of an insurrection against the United States. At the time, we've shown you, he claimed he would deal with anyone who did violence, but the truth was different and much darker. He supports the violence. He embraced the violence. He embraces violence against police. He is soft on crime as long as it's crime that benefits his politics. And so those things sound uncomfortable to say. Here we are on Memorial Day. People don't necessarily want to just sit around and believe the worst about their president. But everything I just told you is what he's doing. It's not opinion. He is anti-police. He is freeing people who were incarcerated only because they attacked police. And now he wants to pay some of them, which is a reward for what they did. The Trump DOJ is barreling ahead on that plan, which might be illegal and get stopped, to fund Jan 6 and other criminals. Now it's also trying to remove facts about what they did on their site, including violence that used to be documented by our government. And now the people in control of our government apparently don't want you to know who they're friends with, what they support, why they're anti-police.
Please be advised, there are masks under your seats. Please grab a mask, place it in your lap, and be prepared to don your mask in the event that we get a...
Everybody stay down! Get down!
Treason! 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 You spoke your name! Amen! Amen!
That's just a slice of what those criminals did. And you have to remember, there's so much lying about this that just playing the documentary video really blows up in the face of what people like the president and others are claiming and lying about, what the DOJ is doing. They want to hide something that adults lived through, that we remember. The people storming the Capitol, convicted of sedition and other crimes. And Trump's own Republican Party is now joining the revolt of all people who support the law, democracy, police, who were aghast that Trump wants to fund and pay people he freed from prison for crimes against the United States. We truly are in this Orwellian moment, and some Republicans are rejecting the plot to go beyond freeing those people from prison to paying them with your tax dollars.
I think it's stupid on stilts. Someone who assaulted a police officer admitted their guilt, and now we're going to pay them for that?
I don't think it's an appropriate use of money.
What are your thoughts about this weaponization fund from the president at this point?
Yeah, not a big fan.
I call it a payout pot for punks.
Well, we talked about this a couple of days ago, Ari, before this proposed settlement was even announced, when it was just in litigation. And we noted that it was really unorthodox because the president of the United States, even though he had filed that lawsuit in his personal capacity, was on both sides of the V, as plaintiff and as the defendant, as the head of the IRS. That ordinarily, I think, would have raised real questions about the jurisdiction of this suit. But obviously, the Department of Justice, which the president also seems to be in charge of, moved very quickly to get to this settlement. I want to note one really interesting part of the settlement that few commentators have really talked about. There's a clause in the settlement that reads, once the funds are deposited, the U.S. has no liability whatsoever for the protection or safeguarding of these funds, regardless of bank failure, fraudulent transfers, or the misuse of those funds. And I think the last part, the misuse of those funds, means the United States is indemnifying itself in case these funds are distributed to individuals who then go and use the funds for other purposes, whether it is criminal purposes or other purposes that would redound to the detriment of the American public. The country is indemnifying itself. Why might that be important? Because a lot of the people lining up to get those funds right now are people like the January 6 protesters who have not only had their sentences pardoned or commuted, but now stand to benefit from this taxpayer-funded slush fund that's available that can be used for any purpose they want going forward.
And that raises the question of whether the people arranging this foresee that as possible or likely. You know, that's how lawyers look at it. Sometimes there are clauses that seem extensive, but you don't spend a lot of time indemnifying against intergalactic time travel war because you just don't think that that's really likely. Here, it seems that you freed these people, you pay these people, the president continues to lie about election results, and any time that he and his team lose an election, these people get ready to come out and commit more crimes.
No, that's right. We already know from reporting that dozens of those individuals who were pardoned or had their sentence commuted for January 6th offenses have subsequently been arrested, charged, and convicted of other offenses, including violent offenses, weapons charges. Some have been convicted of sexual offenses against children and child pornography charges. So there's a wide range here. Another point I think that really needs to be emphasized is that this should be challenged. Unfortunately, the judge who had this case did not call a hearing to probe the nature of this settlement or to discuss the nature of this settlement with Todd Blanche, who's obviously representing the government, the IRS here. But there are other individuals who could sue. We already have some individuals, the Capitol Police officers who were injured on that day, who are suing to challenge this fund. There are questions about whether or not they have cognizable injuries that could sustain federal jurisdiction. But what remains to be seen is whether Congress, which does have the authority to do this, whether it will file a lawsuit or otherwise step in. So it's great that Republicans are raising the alarm about this in the Senate, but it would be even better if both sides of the aisle took steps to raise questions in court and outside of this about the legitimacy of this fund.
Right. And wouldn't courts care a lot about a loophole that is both potentially dangerous, we've already discussed that, and could crack open all constitutional separation of powers around spending? I mean, spending
Yes.
is the congressional power. If you say, oh, well, this is from a fake lawsuit or a fake settlement or a fake whatever the pretext is, lawyers and judges are just, as you know, respected lawyers, know the exceptions swallow rules. And so if you can say, oh, we call this a settlement and now we can take billions that Congress didn't appropriate and do whatever with it, don't judges care about patrolling that because the Constitution has something to say about it?
No, that's exactly right. Article 1 gives the power of the purse to Congress. Congress has not appropriated this fund for this purpose. The money for this is coming out of what is known as the Judgment Fund. That is a fund that's available to DOJ to settle cases, but it hasn't necessarily been conditioned on this kind of activity. There are also questions about whether or not a fund of this nature would violate other provisions of the Constitution, like the 14th Amendment, which has a provision in it that specifically says that you cannot provide benefits to those who have engaged in insurrection against the United States. This might be an interesting place to test that particular theory.
Keep going, but we'll put that up on screen because that's pretty straightforward, 14th Amendment, Section 4.
Sherrilyn Ifill has talked about this at length. So, I mean, there are the separation of powers, the sort of structural questions here, but also these very substantive questions about whether or not these individuals count as insurrectionists. And if they do, whether they can, under the Constitution, receive these funds, like leaving aside the propriety of the fund in the first place, which I think raises constitutional questions of its own.